The Confederation had ruled the galaxy for 12 millennia. Their armadas had crushed 1,000 rebellions, absorbed 10,000 worlds, and never, not once, faced true defeat. So when the scout ships returned with news of a small blue planet in Sector 7G, protected by nothing but primitive fusion drives and kinetic weapons, High Commander Vexthor had laughed. "They call it Earth," the scout had reported, mandibles clicking nervously. "They've marked territorial boundaries around their star system, warning beacons in 17 languages." Vexthor had dismissed the concern with a wave of his crystalline appendage. "Boundaries? They dare claim sovereignty over space itself? Ready the fleet. We'll teach these mammals the price of arrogance." Nick Chen floated in the observation deck of Station Sentinel-9, coffee bulb in hand, watching the sensor displays with mild interest. Beside him, Kiza Okonkwo reviewed the tactical readouts, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic projections. "They crossed the Ort line," she said quietly. 217 ships, Dreadnought class or larger. Nick took a sip of coffee, grimacing at the recycled taste. "Did we send the final warning?" 3 hours ago. Same as protocol dictates. They ignored it." Kiza's fingers danced across her console. "They're accelerating toward the Kuiper Belt. ETA to Mars orbit, 42 hours. "Well?" Nick set down his coffee and cracked his knuckles. "Can't say we didn't warn them. Send the activation codes." Kiza hesitated, her hand hovering over the command interface. "You sure?" "Once we do this, they crossed the line, Kiza, literally. We drew it, we marked it, we warned them in their own language." Nick's voice was calm, almost gentle. "What happens next is on them." She nodded and entered the sequence. Aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion, Vexthor watched his fleet surge forward with satisfaction. The humans had sent another transmission, pathetic pleas for mercy, no doubt. He didn't bother listening. "Commander," his tactical officer chittered. "Energy signatures detected. Multiple points throughout the system. Their defense platforms powering up." Vexthor's laugh echoed through the command chamber. "At this range, they're no threat. No, sir. The signatures are moving, converging on our position." Before Vexthor could respond, the stars began to vanish. Not metaphorically. One by one, the distant points of light winked out as if swallowed by an invisible tide. Then his sensors went mad. Dozens, hundreds, thousands of objects decloaking throughout the system. They weren't ships. "What in the name of the first ones?" Vexthor whispered. Back on Sentinel-9, Kiza watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. Grid Alpha through Omega reporting full activation. "The swarm is live." Nick nodded, pulling up a secondary screen. "How long did it take us to build them?" 80 years? 83, Kiza corrected. "Ever since the Proxima incident. After we learned we weren't alone, the Security Council decided borders needed enforcement mechanisms." The display showed what the Confederation fleet was seeing. Millions of autonomous drones, each no larger than a volleyball, emerging from hidden facilities throughout the solar system. They'd been dormant, scattered across asteroids, buried in lunar regolith, hiding in the rings of Saturn, waiting. Individually, they were nothing. Collectively, they were a nightmare. "The swarm doctrine," Nick murmured, watching the drones accelerate toward the Confederation fleet. "We couldn't match their technology, so we didn't try. We just made sure there were more of us than they had bullets." Vexthor's fleet opened fire, lance beams capable of glassing continents carved through space, vaporizing thousands of the approaching drones. Plasma torpedoes detonated in cascading chains, each explosion consuming hundreds more. It didn't matter. For every drone destroyed, 10 more emerged. They moved with eerie coordination, learning from each encounter, adapting their approach vectors. They didn't carry weapons, they didn't need to. At relativistic speeds, mass was weapon enough. The first impacts came like meteor strikes. Drones punched through shields designed to withstand planetary bombardment, their momentum carrying them deep into ship hulls. Secondary explosions bloomed across the fleet as fusion reactors breached. "Retreat!" Vexthor screamed. "Full reverse!" "Jump to hyperspace." But the drones had already thought of that. They'd positioned themselves around the fleet's jump coordinates, creating a gravitational interference pattern. The hyperspace windows flickered and collapsed. They were trapped. Kiza monitored the engagement with professional detachment, but her hands trembled slightly on the controls. 60% of their capital ships are disabled. The rest are trying to break through the outer perimeter. "They won't make it." Nick said softly. Let them try to retreat beyond the border. If they cross back over the Ort line, send the recall signal. And if they don't? Nick was silent for a long moment, watching another Confederation dreadnought break apart under the relentless assault. Then we don't stop until there's nothing left to chase. High Commander Vexthor lived long enough to see his flagship torn apart by 1,000 tiny impacts, each one a human-made drone carrying out its singular purpose: defend the border at any cost. His last thought, as the command chamber depressurized around him, was of the final human transmission he'd ignored. It had been simple. Just 7 words in flawless Confederation standard. You have been warned. Turn back now. 3 days later, when the Confederation sent their search and rescue fleet to investigate, they found nothing. No wreckage, no debris, no survivors. The swarm had been thorough, breaking down every piece of foreign material and incorporating it into Earth's defensive network. There was only one thing left at the coordinates where the fleet had disappeared: a new warning beacon, broadcasting in 17 languages, now including Confederation Standard. Beyond this line lies Earth's sovereign territory. Cross at your own extinction. Kiza stood beside Nick in the observation deck, watching the beacon pulse in the darkness. Think they'll listen this time? She asked. Nick took a sip of his terrible coffee and smiled grimly. They will. Because now when they tell the story, when they warn others about the borders of human space, they won't be sharing threats or bravado. They'll be sharing ghost stories. Ghost stories? Yeah, about the fleet that ignored the warnings. About the ships that crossed the line and were never seen again. About the humans who don't conquer or invade. We just make it very, very clear where we end and you begin. Kiza nodded slowly. And if anyone's foolish enough to test us again? Nick set down his coffee and pulled up the swarm's status report. Millions of drones, still growing in number, still waiting in patient silence throughout the solar system. Then we'll add another ghost story to the collection. Outside the station, Earth turned peacefully in the void, its blue surface serene and inviting. But around it, in the cold darkness between worlds, the swarm waited, humanity's promise and warning in equal measure. The borders had been drawn. The price for crossing them had been paid, and the galaxy would remember,